Hello and welcome to yet another very exciting webinar from SoftServe. I'm Eugene Borohovich, Senior Vice President of Healthcare for SoftServe. The ones that are following the industry, there's a number of, I'll call buzzword or hot topics in the field, specifically in healthcare, but one that's been occupying a lot of the time and content, but also a lot of the work that a lot of companies are working on is around artificial intelligence. And so one of the questions that we're posing today, will artificial intelligence change healthcare, and how long will that take? And so I'll take everyone through today a little bit of visionary statements, a lot of the work that's being done in the field, how we at SoftServe are applying it, and even some of the trends in the money flows that are going into younger companies in artificial intelligence that are trying to solve issues and problems in healthcare. So without further ado, why don't we start with one of the largest problems today in healthcare, and I'm just trying to switch to the slide. These are some of the slides. We just hosted and sponsored with SoftServe Health 2.0 Amsterdam, and it was actually all around artificial intelligence. One of the guys that presented is Guy Sohn. So the next few slides, I just absolutely loved how he captured it, and with his permission, I'm actually reusing them. But if you think about the challenges today, 80% of our spend in healthcare are actually on the elderly or chronically ill. You won't believe it, by 2025, we're going to have 4 times as many 80 plus. And some of the challenges around actually caring for the elderly, not just from the cost perspective, but even from a worker perspective, there's a shortage of nurses today, and therefore there's a lot of activity and a lot of money and a lot of resources that are spent to try to optimize that experience for the elderly. So how do we actually care for these people? Believe it or not, somewhat of artificial intelligence, so robots to the rescue. And if you think about worldwide, it's really a playground where hackers, engineers, and business people and clinicians and nurses can actually get together and collaborate. How do you actually solve some of these issues in the aging population? Some of the challenges today is how do you keep people out of the nursing homes and actually in the independent living environments of their homes or their homes of their loved ones. A lot of the elderly complain about the level of isolation that they have. So how do you actually communicate with the elderly and empower them? And also increase some of that human cognition of what's around you. This is actually how the world looks, and I believe this is from IBM Watson, but if you think about cognitive Internet of Robot things, there's a number of things that are sort of part of that. One of them is Tune Analyzer. We're all familiar with speech to text, right? We use this every day today on our phones. A Q&A or smart Q&A. One of the pieces that's lacking today in the industry is natural language classification still. That's probably one of the laggards, but visual recognition and imaging recognition is probably leading in that space. And then can you use some kind of robot software development kits to actually interact with the environment? From a data perspective, this is also a beautiful chart. I mean, we know that just in the last 2.5 years, 90% of world data was generated. So that's where you are here. But just in literally 5-6 years, we're going to have zettabytes and zettabytes of data being generated. And this includes imaging and sensor devices, and a lot of that is actually unstructured data, which technologies today don't deal well with. A concept that you actually introduced and I absolutely loved is Ambient Intelligence. So it's Internet of Robot things, plus some cognitive computing, which is the artificial intelligence that we know of, can it generate MI, right? It's all about the human being, about I and me. And so can our environments get smarter with the help of robots and environmental sensors? A little bit of a plug, Yuri is actually going to be hosting sometime in Q3 the Robots to the Rescue sort of hackathon playground. But let's step back just a little bit, just to give a picture. If you're new to artificial intelligence and you're diving straight into healthcare, you probably want some context. So the actual term was established in 1950, so this is nothing new as far as artificial intelligence as a term. And it really meant a number of things. The most, and I guess the foremost meaning is that it's intelligence that's actually exhibited by the machines. And we've seen a lot of that today, even with the self-driving cars, right? It's intelligent to make decisions, when to pause, to stop, and constantly changing. The latest thing, again, if you're following the industry news, one of the most complicated cognitive games of Go, the winner was a machine, 4-1 in the last few weeks. So that's pretty impressive for machines to start exhibiting actual intelligence. The other aspect is actually reasoning and knowledge, but we're all familiar with artificial intelligence or machines actually, I'll call it sucking in the knowledge or indexing knowledge. But more importantly, the AI is actually moving for the machines to make sense of that knowledge and making it actionable. We also know about planning and learning. So these are learning algorithms, neural networks that are constantly learning from each other. Who's in the network? How do you route this stuff? And the best example, I don't know what I would do without Waze or Google Maps, right? As far as just planning your day. The machines are telling you where to go, what to do, which route to take. The other aspect, again, is the natural language processing. We touched on it very briefly. We all speak with different accents, languages, connotations, and even the sound of the voice. And so this is one of the challenges today. How do you actually capture that voice, convert it to text, and understand the intent of that language? And of course, the technology has been enhancing tremendously over the number of years, but it's still one of the big challenges. And then the last thing, and then of course there's many more, but I just wanted to point out just a few, is around perception and object manipulation. So, if you think about just the robots or even the same self-driving cars, what is the perception of proximity of the car or cyclist next to them? How do you actually manipulate objects? So this is talk about surgeries and robotics again. Just wanted to step back and give everybody some context for AI. And, I think we're very, very familiar. We've been using, e-commerce, which took us, over a decade as consumers to get comfortable with. To this date, I still get some fraud prevention blocks, which is sort of annoying, but at the same time, it's the artificial intelligence and some of the fraud algorithms that are being run around e-commerce and banking. Search engines have been using it and getting to know you at a personal level more and more over the last 20 years or so. And one of my favorites is entertainment. I still love my Netflix recommendations, unless, of course, my 11 or 13-year-old watch some teeny bopper shows, and that screws up my recommendation. But there's solutions for that as well. So why AI now, and specifically in the healthcare space? There's a tremendous amount of data assets that are being generated, and we've talked about in some of the previous interviews and the webinars around wearables devices, the environmental sensors that are around you, and so plus the over 2 billion mobile devices and growing month to month is enabling all of us as humans on this planet to continuously generate data. With that, the data growth and the need for processing and storage, the cost of actual compute and storage has been dwindling year after year. And finally, it's really improvements in the learning systems, which are driven by the brilliant data scientists and engineers, such as at SoftServe. So this wouldn't be a webinar. I mean, everything you need to follow the money, right? One of my favorite sort of companies these days is CB Insights that are actually reporting on a lot of the early and growth stage companies. And if you look at the capital that's being poured in, and by the way, this is just general AI startups. This is not healthcare specific. If you look at the jump from 13 to 14, almost tripled the amount. One outlier here, you'll see the number is lower in 2015. In the $394 million that went in 2014. One of them is an outlier. I think something like almost $100 million went into one company. So overall trend is significant. And if you look at the last quarter of 15, there was a big jump, and this is all the way on the right, to 19 deals just in the last quarter. So that's the overall picture. Now the interesting part here is actually what's being used in healthcare. And I'm not going to go through every single box. These you'll be able to actually peruse it, and slides will be uploaded as well. But, for example, virtual assistants, there's a company in UK, Babylon, that's a more traditional doctor on demand, but they're actually leveraging, artificial intelligence to get to know the patient. And somewhat similar, YourMD, right above that, I've actually been trialing that service. It basically communicates with you as a patient almost in a WhatsApp kind of a chat window, so you can actually explore your symptoms. On the left side, patient monitoring and health management, which is, as we all know, we spend, if you're not chronically ill, we spend twice a year at the doctor's office, but when you leave, you're in your own hands. So there's companies like Ginger.io, for example, that's actually using your phone sensors to put therapies in place and health management for you. We actually have a client in UK called OBH, Outcomes-Based Healthcare, and we just finished a project for them to use somewhere around 30 different sensors on an Android phone and collect that data as part of a study with surveys to actually correlate the data collection by the humans that are using it and correlate it to their diabetes. And this is something that a lot of companies are looking at now, the larger companies, and there's certainly a few that are not just experimenting, but actually building business models around. So one of the acquisitions that was made not too long ago, actually, was a UK company called Deepline, and that was made by Google. I think, again, if you're following the space, Google denied for the longest time that they're going to be entering the healthcare space. Well, they're entrenched. So one of the acquisitions with Deepline and in UK are now actually doing some work with the NHS. Streams is an application that they built / acqui-hired to actually look at early prevention of kidney diseases. HARK is another application that's using machine learning and neuroscience to help physicians make their real life decisions that are actionable based on data. And I think in the coming year or two, we'll see a lot more coming out of Deepline as they get entrenched with a lot of the data that the providers and insurers actually hold on behalf of the patients. So this was me 2 years ago, right? We kept talking about robots. On the left side, it was my surprise that I will lose a lot of hair. The joy was that I wasn't losing it probably for another year. And I'm just going to fast forward the next slide. Then Apple, roughly 6 months ago, makes an announcement that they're actually acquiring emotion recognition company Emotion. When I first posted that on Twitter, the feedback that I got was, do you really want the iPhone to tell you how you feel? And, at the first look of it, that's a wise statement. From the other perspective is, obviously for Apple, there's a consumer perspective to it. If Apple can sense what mood you're in, you can direct, the right music, the right content based on your mood. But the implications are even higher as Apple gets more and more into healthcare with their HealthKit. Integrating a lot of this plus emotion, will that make technology seem close to real interaction partner for the patients? So this is just food for thought. And while we can't disclose too much around it, our own R&D team at SoftServe is actually doing quite a lot of research in emotion recognition using all kinds of sensors. If there's some more interest, please reach out to us. You know how to find us at SoftServe Inc. on Twitter. So I love trivia, and if this was a live presentation, I would actually ask you guys who is this, but I'll answer it. So this is Daredevil, one of my favorite sci-fi shows. Unlike Daredevil, as a child he lost his sight. Most of people that lose their sight don't have some kind of a karate coach to enhance their senses. However, there is a technology out there, and one of probably many, for example, air poly. And the idea is that it's actually vision through artificial intelligence helping visually impaired in real time to find the sofa to sit on, to pick up a glass, and et cetera. So if you think about how AI is already impacting patients today, this is one of the examples, and there's many more to come throughout this conversation. So as an example, another one, to this day, preventing melanoma or skin cancers was, you go see your dermatologist once a year, if that, and you take a look at the moles. So this company, Skin Vision, it's a Dutch company. You use an iPhone, camera, and you can keep track of the pictures. And algorithmically, it actually figures out how likely this is to be an actual mole or melanoma or some other skin disease, and informs the clinic that you participate in. So this is a sort of B2B2C model. And the amazing part is the technology behind it and the algorithm behind it are actually making headway in the fact that they can actually they can make sense of this, and accuracy of this is almost as high as actual dermatologists with the tools and the eyes and the brain of training. One of the biggest spends in the industry is around drugs, right, and prescription drugs. And, thinking back sort of in the PBM or pharmacy benefit management days and drug industry, there's quite a lot of stuff going on in genetics. And years ago, companies started giving out tests for warfarin, for example, which is a very expensive drug. And the idea here is that using artificial intelligence, the reality is we don't know what we don't know yet around genetics and fully sequenced genome. The data is absolutely tremendous in size, but there's already early stages, and as early as I would say 5-6 years ago, a lot of this started happening already in the PBM and the pharmaceutical industry, and it's escalating. Well, another one and another major issue in the healthcare industry is around medication adherence. How can you ensure that the patients know what drug to take when and why? That's the most important thing. Will that impact them? So a company called AI Cure is actually using artificial intelligence on the mobile phone. And this is not going to be a discussion around their business model. I mean, it's very hard to make patients take their pills today, not to mention with a phone in front of the mouth, but in other terms, through the clinical trials use cases, for example, or if you're really high-risk population and you know it as a patient, you might want to try this out. And the technology actually works in the way that it's watching the ingestion or the pill going into your mouth. So again, that is here today. That's the amazing part. Again, smarter drug development. So we talked about Deepline, but we hear about IBM Watson and Watson Health. IBM has invested, I think, almost $4 billion in acquisitions, specifically in Watson Health. One of them is Merge Healthcare, and that's really to enable terabytes and terabytes of images to actually see how drugs can be discovered better, as an example, or for radiology. That's where the imaging is. For those of you who've seen any pictures, I wear a little device on my collar that actually takes pictures every 30 seconds. One of the key components of how they got started is really in Alzheimer's space. Can you capture moments of your life, and then if you review it, how will that impact the memory? Well, some of the developments that are happening using AI, believe it or not, is even further. It's how can you replace actually some of the memory and solving abilities that have been lost in Alzheimer's patients. This is very, very early on. I mean, the study of the brain is one of the, we still don't know much about the brain, to be honest, but this is already happening in some of the labs. And finally, one of my favorite topics, there's still a lot of naysayers around wearable health, the accuracy of it, and I think it all depends on the use cases. But again, first time in many, many, many years since human existence, we're actually able to capture some of this data. And, as an example, there's a company, Ovuline, that actually helps families with their pregnancy and fertility. They have over 2 million women in the program. And aside from the clinical aspects of getting pregnant, they're actually tracking and using wearables as one of the data feeds in order to accurately predict for the family what is the best time. One of the key topics, right? I mean, it's great to dream. It's great to talk about things that are happening in small pockets. But the reality is the regulatory and the way it's described by Matthew Scherer is regulatory problems. I'm a big fan of saying that these are some challenges that we really need to solve. I'll start again with the famous self-driving cars. Who is liable and who gets to make a coding decision? Do I protect my owner of the car, or do I protect the bus with 18 people? Right. So a lot of these discussions are somewhat ethical that are happening, and unfortunately for a webinar, it's too short to actually discuss each of these bullet points. But I just wanted to give everybody a picture that while a lot of the companies, large or small, are leveraging artificial intelligence, there's still many unknowns. And sort of bottom line, the regulators still don't fully understand what artificial intelligence is or how best to apply it in our world today. One thing, maybe a little bit of an inspirational note, if you're watching this in the morning, afternoon, or in the evening, but I read this by Friedhof Nansen. This was in the early 1900s. Difficult is what takes a little time, and the impossible is what takes a little longer. So, and this is where artificial intelligence, this is why I compare it. There's still a lot of naysayers around it. There's the Armageddons that the robots will take over the world. But the reality is it's helping patients today. And I'm proud to say that at SoftServe, we've got a number of projects that we're doing today, and this is all around sensors, as I mentioned earlier, collecting some of this data on behalf of our clients, analyzing it, leveraging the skills of our data scientists to find some, not just correlations, but actually structure literally pieces of code that will enhance the care of the patients. So with that, feel free to follow me at Health Eugene on Twitter or SoftServe Inc. Ask us any questions via the public forum, and I look forward to engaging with you all.